welcome to our podcast. We're going to talk about values. Two ladies, Tia Lancaster and Louisa Bulow. Tia, why values?
Why values? Well, I founded Evaluate 180 based on values because I wanted to create something that could assist people in finding happiness in their own lives, like having an internal coach, an internal guide. I wanted to create something that was built in positive psychology because I think that, looking back and going through all our past hurts, all our past sufferings is obviously something that people do a lot in therapy, and I think it's very effective. However, I think we can't change the past. So I really wanted to build on the future, and I wanted to create a tool that brought people back to what really matters. What are the things that are important to me? What are the things I used to do when I was young that brought me joy? What did I learn at school, from my family, from my community, from my church, my synagogue, my temple, whatever it may be? Those are the things that are really important. And I think a lot of sadness that we feel in our lives is rooted in not practicing our values. And I was fortunate. I was a lawyer. I went back to school. And I knew day one, since we ran into the hallway when I, of course, was lost, going back to school at 50 to get my master's in organizational psychology in London. I ran into Louisa and Kelly, who then became two very close friends / additional daughters. Kelly's off working for DocuSign in Ireland. And I knew, and Kelly and I working together, I always talked to Louisa, would have been crazy because we both get really lost in the details. But Louisa and I studied together all the time, and she always kept me on track and made me feel like, oh my God, why is she finished in 3 hours and I'm finished in 26 hours? So it's the lawyer in me, but I'll let Louisa go from here.
Well, I mean, that just goes to my background's in personality assessments previously to this, and it just speaks to behaviors, right? So you play to your strengths. If you have a really small body like Mo Farah, you're going to train to be a long distance runner because actually that's what you're built with, and that's what you should do to be the best of what you can be. So working with Tia is a bit like that. It's like complementing each other's sides, isn't it?
Yes.
Like you're going to go straight in microscopic detail with your kind of goggles on, and I'm there like, that bit doesn't matter at all.
Totally.
So we meet somewhere halfway in the middle. But interestingly, it's our values that actually are the same. So actually we retook our model recently, and out of our final 8 we had about 4 or 5 overlapping. And as different as we are, and as different as a lot of people are in their behaviors and how they act and what their strengths are, their values that sit underneath that are completely different. If you look around in your friendship groups and people you hang out with, values will be similar with them, but actually how they then bring out your behaviors is really interesting. So I think I moved away from personality because a lot of my conversations with people were like, okay, I'm good at this, I'm bad at this is my blind spot, what do I do next? But actually, if you talk to them about why they were like that, or how that behavior manifested and how these different scales can play out, that was values. So I think it's much more relatable for people. But why do you do what you do?
Serves as the foundation.
It's what you stand for. It's your foundation.
Right. And it's funny that Louisa says that because personality tests, at least when they use them to coach people and to work with teams and to work with leaders, at the root and the base of many of the conversations, Louisa will tell you, they're talking about personality, but it is always values of the foundation. They're the roots. That's it's keeping you grounded. And I think that's almost like too, you read every kind of leadership book, and it doesn't even have to be specifically about leadership. It could be friendship, any book where you're really learning about living and teaching and learning. There's always the moral is values. And I just wondered, everyone talks about values, but nobody is building a tool to really bring them alive and make them active in our lives. We work out to get in shape physically. We study for exams to get into medical school, into law school, and all of the kind of professional schools. We practice our tennis games, or we run to prepare for marathons in preparation. But what do we do to prepare for daily living? What do we do? And so we have to really train our hearts and our minds and our spirits to live value-driven lives so we can create happiness and success at work and at home.
Yeah. And I think happiness is just to add to that is always talked about previously in research as an immediate thing. So it's about hedonism. It's about the immediate pleasure that it gives you. But decades worth of research now into happiness and the well-being space shows that it's about personal growth, and it's about autonomy, and it's about living and moving forward and what you end up doing with it. So it relates very much to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is quite famous. The triangle, the basic needs at the bottom and safety, you start fulfilling those, but what's at the top? It's self-actualization, but it takes a long time to get there. And in all stages, you get happier and happier and happier at the top, but values probably sit very much at the top of that. So finding your
I agree. And Louisa, being, many years my junior, is very wise, because I think that I had a friend that I spoke to, that very bright friend of mine that graduated from American high school with me, and she went off to Duke University, and she reached out to me much later in life. And I think it was when I was doing my master's, and I was telling her what I was doing, and we were talking to each other about that. And I was telling her my plans to have this value-based company. And she said, isn't it crazy that it takes until your 50s until you feel as if you actually have something to say, something to actually contribute to the universe? So I think that's really, if I were to be honest, I've been building Evaluate 180 for the last 30 years of my life.
What is the most important value?
Oh,
I don't know. I'll go with that. I mean, I would give a couple. Because
Yeah,
I've been in a couple podcasts before, and somebody asked me that question, and I had to kind of review that in my mind. And I think for me, and I don't necessarily think these are the ones that I prioritize. I mean, I think maybe two of them. It would be kindness, humility, and courage. Because I read a long time ago, when I was doing my values research, that courage, if you look at it as a virtue, because virtues and values are oftentimes very interchangeable. If you don't have courage, you can't activate all the rest of the values in your life. And so I think for me, I think with most things in your life, tragedies, sufferings, if you don't have the courage to kind of move forward and to get past them, then you don't really have the most important tool. So those would be my top three.
I think my ones that come straight to mind, but bouncing on that a little bit, 'cause something happened when you say, but kindness is definitely one of my final eight, and so is compassion. And I do think I feel other people's emotions when they're feeling something. I feel it deeply myself, but the kindness and the compassion, wanting to show that, and how my kindness probably manifests a little bit differently to how Tia's does as well. But ultimately, we both see that as a value that's important. But today I walk across London Bridge every morning, and I've walked across every day this week and looked at homeless people and thought, I should get them something, I should give them money. And I've walked past, and this gut feeling within me is like, oh, I feel just gross. What am I doing? Why am I doing that? So I have a load of coins by the front door, and I put a load in my bag today. So actually, when I walked past someone, I gave them whatever I had in my bag, because I just thought, oh, that just feels so much better to be feeling like I'm doing something. And I guess my point is, when I'm not kind all the time. God, I wish I was, but hormones and all, as a woman in this world, you can't. If you ask Rich, definitely not. But at the end of the day, I try to be, and when I'm not, and I'm feeling I'm not activating that, it's a conflict. It's like an inner conflict that you feel, and that's why, again, I think values are so important. So,
I agree, and that's activating those important values that you learned wherever, from whomever, but likely family and there's religion, all those places that I talked about, really community. And really what's happened a lot in our world is that we've gotten away from those things. Our world used to be much more like microcosms. We were much more related to, like, especially in Europe, the town square, and meeting in the town square at dinner time and seeing your friends and the kids all playing together, or meeting at church on Sunday, or having Shabbat dinner on Friday night. And families still do that, but people are spread across the world. And I think Louisa said it before, and I think she's said it quite well, is that we're so connected, but we're so disconnected. So I think that values across families, across teams, across organizations, if we can work on creating a unification of our human values and our personal values, then we begin to create those same connections that came so naturally when our worlds were smaller and they weren't so spread across the universe like they are now.
And I guess my point when I say that is we're connected. I mean, the three of us are all in different places across the ocean and all different continents, and we can sit here and talk, but we're so disconnected with what we actually want in life.
Right.
The Gallup study, or the Gallup poll that came out last year, was saying that 19% of people are actually just miserable in their jobs. They're not just unhappy or stressed, but just purely miserable, which is staggering. And that's because they're not doing something they want, or they're not ever thinking about what they want in the first place, right? So I always say it's a bit like opening your drawer with all the jumpers in, which is all jumbled up and a mess, and everyone hates having to go and fix that drawer in the house.
Yeah.
The minute you do, you take it out, you get rid of the jumpers you don't want. You might have bought a new one, you put that in, you fold it neatly, you put it back in the drawer. It's all the same content, but you now know what's there and you know what's important, and it's more neatly packed. And our model and what we do with values is the same thing with your brain. You're just addressing it. You're connecting with what you have and what you need and what can be neatly packaged and put away, because it's what
Exactly. And
we're
that's
like,
such a, that's a great,
I can't do it.
Exactly. And I think that's a great point, because I think oftentimes in the exercises we take people through in the training session, and now that Tina takes the people through our avatar, is I think people often always ask when they're sorting values is, wait, am I supposed to be sorting what I'm good at or what I'm bad at? And Louisa and I always say to them, well, it's whatever it is to you, whatever personal values means to you, because what you're good at might just mean that those values are ones that have brought you the most success in your life. So you just keep addressing those. And what you're bad at is probably things you have been really ignoring. They're there, but they're either too difficult to assess or to access, not to access, from your brain, from your heart. It's too painful, whatever it may be. That's really kind of almost a similar feeling as to really taking out that drawer of your jumpers and organizing them and then reorganizing.
I should say sweaters, shouldn't I, if we're being
well, I don't really know what country I live in and what vernacular I'm supposed to speak. I guess we just speak people.
It was like a wake-up call for me, because I saw that generosity is really important for me, and I think that all things in my life changed when I really start to appreciate, okay, I love to be generous. I love to do something without interest. I love to do something from pure love. And then I think if I do that daily, if I practice, how you say, like generosity through the day, I can feel much more happier that day immediately.
Yeah,
1
the
hour.
fulfillment.
Yes. So for me, when I got the result, I was like, yes, I knew it. Like, I feel it, like I should just do this. I just keep doing this. And then I was thinking about, okay, now I'm married, but I think it would be nice to do this training session and to get results before you jump in some relationship.
Absolutely. I agree. Premarital training, because what do we value? What do we share? And if we have some really, really differing values, I mean, that's going to make us interesting parents, interesting friends, but let's then talk about some of those things. I agree. And makes me think of a conversation I've had with Milena in the past. She loves it's either a Netflix series or a Netflix movie called The Minimalist.
Yes.
And the minimalist is, removing those things in your life and really living at a minimal level, because when you go back to that minimal level, that's where you find joy. And that's really why at Revaluate 180 and what Louisa and I do in that first activity, when we prioritize our values, that's why it's a removal. Because people are like, oh, I just want to pick the ones that are important to me. Well, that's too easy. And actually, that's not even giving you that mindfulness journey. And it's not giving you that pain point of doing that inner look and inner discovery. It's when we have to remove things and really decide what's important. It's like, do I like that? Let's go back to the drawer of jumpers. Do I really want this one? Oh, I got that when I was, had my first job, or, what do I really need? And what do I really want? And so when I'm choosing between kindness and compassion or love and power, I mean, how do I choose? I mean, they're all worth the same in our model. But it comes down to removal process. And when we have to literally decide to minimize our lives and to remove things, that's when we really discover what's important.
And that's real life. It's tough decisions. And that's why, again, we have timed, the activities have a timer to them.
Of course, I could sit 6 hours. I could sit 6 hours and I could make a choice.
And that's not realistic. That doesn't happen in life. You are under pressure. And especially in the workplace, when we use the assessment there or the activities there, the training, we call it, really. We've got to simulate what's actually happening, right? And making those tough decisions is something that we have to do. But values are more, they're even harder, because it's not about, okay, I'm very good at, like, I'm a creative person. Okay, that's my strength. I value creativity in my life. That's like, I need to be doing something that pushes me to get out the door in the morning, that gives me that creative pursuit. And it takes me somewhere where I'm feeling happy, because actually today I got to do something creative, whatever the hell that is for me, is a very passionate response that your body has, versus, okay, I'm good at that.
Exactly. It's evoking emotion is what it's doing. And it's not the word for the word's sake. It's what underpins those words. And I that's a really, really good way to describe it, because oftentimes when I've seen people make change and moving their value atlases from where they are today and then moving into what we call their tilt reality, where they can have more meaning and purpose in their life, I see people eliminate values and they become their lost or forgotten values based upon them choosing these blockers, the second exercise we do in the training, where for example, I have a close friend that when I was in the early stages of designing the model, she's single and she removed intimacy and love very early in the process, like in her first and second source. She has a fulfilling career. She has, lots of friends, close family. And after she went through the training, she ended up going on a diet and losing 25 pounds or something. That wasn't what her value wasn't really weight loss. Her value was that her lost forgotten values were love and intimacy. And she felt like, oh my gosh, well, I want to put myself out there more. So she wasn't just trying to diet for diet's sake. It's like setting those New Year's Eve resolutions, or setting these goals that fall to the wayside and then would feel depressed. It was what is like love and intimacy underpin me feeling better about myself, me losing weight. So that was the great motivator. So you choose creativity. Creativity is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what are those behavioral changes in your life? Not, oh, yes, I'm creative or I'm friendly. Okay, great. But what does that really mean?
I was doing a training session. I saw that a lot of things that I want to choose, I was asking myself, is it like something that I expect from people, or I should do it? Because, for example, if I expect somebody to be loyal, am I loyal, or I'm just expecting for them to be loyal to me? So that's because you were talking.
It was actually like made you question your own, you were doing some, what it is. And Louisa could explain that even further, because she's even the better psychologist than I am. I'm a good lawyer and a great values expert. But it's a lot of self-actualization and self-awareness. I think that's when you're forced to do a deep dive and go inward like that, those are important questions to ask. And the problem is, I think the reason why people have such a great feeling about these activities is it's forcing that self-awareness. It's forcing you to be mindful of what those things mean to you.
I think a lot of the time you do expect that the values you have to be coming out of other people too. So you probably tend to hang out with, if you think of a close friendship group, for example, there will be common values within that you all share, because otherwise you're going to be constantly in conflict. Or there's that one person in the group you get on with a little bit less, probably you've got some value conflict. So one of my top ones is loyalty. It always has been, always will be. So if I see someone going against that value, it triggers me. And that doesn't mean I need to put that on them. In fact, that's a bias I need to be aware of, because what my values are doesn't, like, I can't tell other people how they are. You can only control one thing in life, and that's yourself, right? But it definitely creates a discomfort when you see someone else not activating the same values as you, because you expect that in return. I expect people to be loyal to me, but I shouldn't. My stepfather is a CBT therapist, and he's like, you can't should people. What do you mean you can't should people? You can't say they should, because you don't control them. You only control yourself.
It's kind of true. That's true. I mean, you can choose. That is so great, because I exercise that in my own life. That takes away a lot of kind of negativity that you might accept into your life, because you are shoulding them and expecting things. And so, your expectations should be of yourself, and how the world responds to you is how the world responds to you. And you just obviously can't take everything personally. Milena's, I think, actually good at that. I think you're actually good at that, because I think it maybe even from, I obviously know Milena quite well from your upbringing and growing up in like a war-torn country, and really when you just have to survive for food and water, that process of should and would and whatever is a little bit different. You expect things from yourself, and
Yeah, of course, but
you know,
but honestly, what I noticed, like when you mention like values conflict, you know, like I can see that a lot of things that I need to do, like if I want to do business with somebody, if he's not loyal to his partner, you know, like long, you know, even they're like 8 months or 8 years together, if he's not loyal or she, I don't want to do business with them. You know, like,
yeah.
because if he's doing that to somebody who is so close to them, I don't want to waste time on that.
It is, but that's an interesting point, because I think that when I was doing my dissertation on values, and I spoke to a lot, and since it was Wall Street and personal values that I studied, one of the questions I asked the Wall Street guys and girls, I would say, is, do you feel like you practice your values better at home or at work? Now, really, Louisa would tell you that values are fairly static across both parts of our world, our work life and our home life, but it's when we choose to activate them and how we choose to activate them. So that's an interesting question, because I think many people would be much more loyal and honest and what have you in their workspace, and come home and actually take for granted the people around them, and not be quite maybe as kind and compassionate and patient. It shouldn't be that way, but at least in the minds of the Wall Street individuals I spoke to, I would say almost all of them said that they found it easier to practice their values at work than they did at home, which is very interesting. So I agree with you. So I just wonder that, because if we apply that across the world to our politicians and to big corporate leaders, I think we would be, yeah, we'd be greatly disappointed in a lot of ways. I mean, I agree with you. I think that how do you carry yourself one way in one interaction and then completely differently in another interaction? But
I don't think you do, because I think the same behaviors are happening across, and I think people would be surprised. It's like there was a show in the UK which was like, I think it was called Secret Eaters or something. They record people in their house to show them, like, you actually eat way more than you think. It's the same thing. If you look at yourself, kind of thing. And it was just interesting because of there's a famous personality assessment, the Hogans, and they will say you have your identity and you have your reputation. So your identity is like what you think you are like, but the reputation is what people are actually seeing. I reckon it's the same with values. So for example, me, loyalty, going back to that, I know with my friends, I'm fiercely loyal. And if someone were to say something bad about them, I can't get out of my head. I have to shut it down. At work, how that manifests for me is because at work, you work with some people you like, some people you don't like, right? So historically, my in-team are the ones that I'm loyal to, and I will look after, and I'll make sure, and I let them actually get away with more than I would for those who aren't kind of in my in. And that's an issue for me, because that's creating a bit of a counterproductive behavior, which I need to stop, right? So although it's coming out differently, it's still there.
It's interesting. No, that's cool. That's true. That's true. I mean, it kind of makes me think of something like in my personal life when I had this crazy incident that happened at my home. And it had nothing to do with anyone in my family, but it had something to do with some friends that really engaged in some really non-productive, reputation injuring behaviors that became public. And I was a little younger in those, and I think we were in our 30s when it happened. And I really struggled. I remember having the conversation with a close friend of mine, and she said, well, what do you care about what other people think or your reputation? And I thought for a long time about that, because, you know, she's right. You know what I mean? And you know, you have to just walk your own talk and know who you are. And that if you weren't part of that, who cares what other people think? But I came back to her like several months later, and I said, I really thought about what you said, and that, why do I care? And I really shouldn't care, because the people who really know me know the kind of person I am. And I said, it's not so much, I think, that it's a reputation that I cared about. I felt like it was my character, like in a character assassination. Because I think we build our lives, what we're building. I try to tell my daughters that, is that we're building our character. But our values are very much rooted in our character. And so when you have a character assassination, that's really, really difficult. But it's once again,
But it's
It
like
might
they're
be,
testing your values, like what you stand for,
yeah,
what you
exactly.
want. Goes
Yeah,
back to the conflict piece, right? So
yeah,
I don't get, it's very hard to understand. It's almost like, well, for me, how could you not value loyalty? Like, what are you doing? It's
yeah.
honestly
And
what I think, but that is unfair. But
yeah.
it's just kind of what we do.
Right. And it's also just human behavior that they might want to think. And oftentimes people love to rejoice in other people's sorrows. Unfortunately, that's just the way human nature is. And so it's just really value-based living really doesn't really come into your life in an everyday way until things are at odds, until you're making those difficult decisions, until you've
Such a
had
good point.
something, something that bad that has happened, or something really rejoiceful or happy, and that's happened. And that's when you really contemplate values. So we're asking people, let's contemplate them regularly. Let's contemplate them more as almost like it's part of our everyday living. So we can be striving to be better people. And as we're doing these striving activities, we should feel happier, and we should feel like our lives are filled with more meaning.
We're basically, we're living in the matrix. We're kind of all just trudging along every
Yeah.
single day. And like,
Yeah.
what is that? I literally watched it recently on a flight, but I don't know whether you get unplugged or you get replugged to kind of realize you're in the matrix. Can't exactly remember. But when you get that rebirth, it's like, what? It's almost like that with your values.
Yeah.
Actually, what's going on? We're kind of in that clock in, clock out phase, especially with things post-pandemic where everyone's like, what on earth is going on? We've got a whole new generation coming into the workforce who, quite frankly, expect to be treated well, because it's like, okay, I know my development is important, my professional development is, and companies are going to have to start recognizing that.
They are. I mean, they're resetting the corporate world. I mean, to be fair, like value assessment and value-based living is all fine and dandy for the individual, but corporations are really facing a backlash. And I think it is going to be a come to the middle, because I think our Gen Zers don't even know what full-time work is even like. They don't even know what it's like to have mentors on a team. They don't even know what it's like to not be in their pajamas and like work from their beds, like horizontally, even, as my nephew Nick likes to say. He's like, I'm going to go work. I got to be horizontal. I mean, they don't. So I think that yes, companies are beginning to recognize we do have to treat the whole person. And that's important, because you don't leave your problems and your sufferings and all the things, that the garbage in your life, and just, roll over to your computer and forget about them. So this is an amazing thing that's come about from hybrid work and from the pandemic, but also there will be a little bit of a backlash, I think, because I think the Gen Zers have to realize that this is still reality, and we have to work, and we have to work hard, and you have to give something to your employer as well. And that's all value-based as well. Give, receive, reward, benefits,
But hopefully in that we'll see a corporate environment where there's much less burnout, there's much more engagement, and there's a lot more people who, quite frankly, I as a millennial, I look at Gen Zers and I think, you are so confident and you know exactly what you want generally. Obviously I'm generalizing here.
Yes.
And there's a part of that, it's like, that's an amazing quality, actually. So to be able to utilize that and say, well, these are individuals who are coming into the workforce saying, this is what I want, and this is what I value, and this is what's important to me.
Exactly. And that's going to teach.
With that,
it's true.
They'll be motivated, they'll show up, and quite honestly, a lot of companies will stop losing a lot of money on employees who do not want to be there, who are stuck in the matrix. Is my new analogy.
That's really a good point. I think companies are learning that, like, as Nick would say, kegerators and bean bags and ping pong tables aren't what they're asking for. So there is going to be this, I do think, coming to the middle.
And what you want and what Milena wants are different as well. So the biggest issue that we do in not in psychology, but just in general, is we say people like this. That's just not true, because every single person is completely different in terms of how they are and in terms of what's important to them. And
right,
that's
but if you exactly
nice.
Right. And what's great about when you start to get down to the root of it, and you start to really build companies based upon the values of the founders and whatnot, then maybe you can hire a company where every Friday you have off to go do your favorite activity, is what this company believes in. But if companies really start to root their the curation of their talent and what is really important to them, then they'll have more like-minded people. They're going to have a lot of different people because looking at people's
You
values,
need that.
you want that because you want to build teams based on difference. You want to have some real strong commonalities, like Louisa and I working together and we're having 3 or 4 of our final 8 values that are similar. That's what makes us so cohesive. And that's what makes us really productive. Same with you, Milena, you know, this just makes us productive as friends, as, you know.
Yeah, but what do you think? What we share in common? Which value we share in common? So we have a podcast now.
I mean, maybe collaboration.
Maybe.
I think we're collaborative, and I think we're have a lot of. I mean, we're like-minded because we're going towards the same goal, because I think we truly believe in people living happier, more meaningful lives. So I think there's collaboration, and I think there's probably, I don't know, what do you think? What would be another one? Let's each name one. I'd say collaboration.
I almost think it's like, okay, our goal is the same. Let's create a happier workforce. Yes. Let's just do it. That's it. On paper, let's make a happier workforce. However the hell we're going to do it, that's what we're going to do. How we get there, for example, the 3 of us here, is what we're talking about now. So how we're going to get to that goal is the values that we have. But I do think we do it slightly differently, right?
For sure.
So how we each approach it is different, but what brings us together is probably that a lot of the values that sit in our global vision zone, that altruistic side of things, wanting to help, wanting to make a wider impact. The 3 of us will all have, whether it's not exactly the same, very similar and strong tilts towards global vision. I know it's my strongest zone. Tia, I think it's pretty much yours with regulation. I can't remember with yours, Milena, but probably because that's what is giving us that mission to make the workforce happier. We're not doing it for money. We're not doing it to kind of have a big accolade or a reward or the stars in LA, but not that we'd get that for this, but we should. But we're doing it to help.
You never know. Never know. We should have a guest. We should bring guests on. We should have Renee come, our mathematician, and start to bring different people in.
That's all in plan. That's all in plan.
Truly, it's what we wish when we want to work with a C-suite. We want to create this like organizational value blueprint for companies. It's what we're talking about now. So anyways, this has been fun.
Yes, thank you so much, ladies. We're gonna continue. We have like so many episodes to film. I think this was really nice. Thank you everybody for watching us, and stay tuned, and we're gonna invite you when it's gonna be our next episode.
Thanks guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. See you later.